Oh, hello, and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk all about one of my very favorite singers of all time, and that is the great Johnny Rivers. Now, Johnny came at a very interesting time in the history of pop music. And when I say pop music, I mean whichever stylistic genre or tendency or vibe tends to dominate mainstream music listening patterns. And this was a time in the 60s when pop music's epicenter was shifting from what we, in hindsight, call the classic pop sounds that developed in the late 40s and remained dominant throughout the 50s and into the early 60s, and towards a mainstream pop sound increasingly dominated by rock music. Now, Johnny Rivers began his musical career in the 50s in terms of his professional career, but he had his golden era in the mid and late 60s into the early 70s. And he provided an important bridge for the vocal based pop music world between these two things, this classic pop and this rock. Now, in many ways, you could say that Johnny Rivers was the quintessential, the best rock and roll crooner of that era, who paved the way for people like Scott Walker, the Walker brothers, of course, and then Scott Walker's solo career. And he did so by having one foot in the door of music that was unapologetically rock and another foot in the door of songs that were a bit more broad based, that could really be shoot into any type of genre description that you want. And it's perhaps no coincidence that one of the songs that he sung was By the Time I Get to Phoenix by one of my favorite songwriters of all time, Jimmy Webb, who, by his own admission, was someone who sat somewhere between that classic pop world and the rock and roll world. And Johnny and Jimmy became very good collaborators on that song because of it. Now, Glenn Campbell went on to have a bigger hit with that song, but Johnny sung it first. But Johnny sung lots of amazing songs that he really put his own hallmark on. One of my absolute favorites from 1967 is Summer Rain, written by James Hendrix. Not that not that one spelled differently, but what a beautiful, beautiful song. I really encourage you to listen to that. He also did another song that he actually wrote called Poor Side of Town. So he wrote and he did covers. He was really quite a versatile guy. And again, that is a beautiful song. Some of you will remember him from Secret Agent Man, which is one of the most licensed songs ever. He did a wonderful sort of ballad type of version of the Smokey Robinson and the Miracle song, The Tracks of My Tears. He gave the same treatment to the Four Top song, Baby I Need Your Lovin'. He had so many interesting hits. He did a great version of Chuck Berry's Memphis. He did a great version of Chuck Berry's Maybelline. Everything he sung was just right. Going into the 70s, his career remained pretty strong. He did a version of Fire and Rain, a version of Blue Suede Shoes, 6 Days on the Road, a cover of one of my favorite Beach Boys songs, Help Me Rhonda. And he was really something. Now, he's also known for being the house singer in the 60s at the Whiskey A Go Go. And this was the time when bands like Love and The Doors were really making their name at clubs like that. So he was definitely part of that rock and roll scene. And he could rock, but he also had this wonderful soothing yet somewhat melancholic crooning voice that just worked so well on so many different levels. He's still around, but he's retired from the music industry. And by the time the late 70s hit, he sadly had curtailed a lot of his work. But whether you listen to his great singles, whether you listen to his really good albums, things like Changes, Rewind, Realization, and Slim Slow Slider, try to say that 3 times fast, all of the stuff is really good. And check out some of the live material that's been released of him singing at the Whiskey A Go Go. Legendary stuff. Happy birthday to Johnny Rivers. You are one of the best. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.